Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Awesome. Oh, perfect. Cool. So thank you so much for the kind introduction. My name is, I'm actually going to step away from this. My name is Vinamrata Singhal. I'm currently the head of product at Landis, which I will tell you more about when we get into this talk. And I'm here today to talk to you about product vision. Really excited also to be opening this conference, where I'm also excited to hear from other speakers. Before I dive in and tell you more about product vision, why it's important, how you sell it, I thought it would be a good idea to start with a couple of case studies to help drive some of the motivation for why this topic is so important. So my first case study that I want to talk to you is about what I like to call the next big thing. So imagine that you are a product leader at a startup or at any company, and you have a product and it has really, really good product market fit, and you are trying to figure out what is the next big thing that you should build because the current product is not growing at a pace that you need it to in order to continue growing your business. And so you have these conversations with other product managers on your team, designers, engineers, business people, and they all want different things. Business people want to know, like, okay, how is this idea going to help us hit the revenue targets that we have set for the board? Designers want to know, how is this actually going to help our customers? How are we going to tell the story of how these two products are going to fit together to our users? And engineers want to know, well, what are we actually building? How is this going to fit in with the vision that we have for the technical architecture? And so you have lots of brainstorms and debates and syncs and meetings to talk about this. And maybe you eventually end up with an answer, but it kind of feels like a Pyrrhic victory. The next case study that I want to talk to you about is what I like to call the clash of the product pods. And so imagine a slightly different scenario. You're a product leader at a company and you have multiple product teams or squads that are working on different features, but they share common product services. And these teams can mostly operate independently, but there are times when they clash because they have to make decisions across common product services. And as the product leader, sometimes you have to intervene in decisions. Two teams can't come to some sort of formal agreement and make the decision based on the trade-offs that the teams present to you. And even though you're able to make those decisions, it doesn't feel super empowering for your teams. And not only that, because you're making a lot of these decisions independently of each other instead of looking at the bigger picture or approaching the product from a more holistic perspective, you might actually be accumulating some product debt that you then have to go and solve for down the road. So you might be like, all right, that's cool. Thanks for sharing those case studies. Why are we talking about this? And the reason why I'm sharing this is because I have seen versions of these scenarios across all of the different places that I've worked at, whether it's large companies like Google large companies like Google, pre-IPO startups like Thumbtack, and Series A and Series B companies like Propel and now Landis. Sorry, I keep pressing something. What's happening? What is going on? All right. And upon reflection across all of these different instances, okay.
Which slide do you want to be on?
The next one. Forward. Forward. Perfect.
So sorry. Your hair is covering the microphone.
Sorry. Thank you. So I've seen this firsthand, and upon further reflection, I found that in a lot of these scenarios, having a really clear product vision to drive some of this decision making would be really useful, and help reduce some of the pain that comes in having these conversations. And so that is why I want to talk to you about not only how to build this product vision, but build it in a way in which it can sell itself. And what it means for our conversation today is I want to walk you through what the elements of that sellable vision look like, how to execute on those elements, then talk about how we're going to make it come together, see it in a hypothetical vision in action, and then wrap it up with some Q&A. So let's get started. Yeah, no problem. Are we good?
Yep.
Awesome. Perfect. It's okay. First talk of the day, technical difficulties. I just want to go back. All right. So first section, back to it. Elements of a sellable vision. Now, before I dive into what each of those specific elements look like, I actually want to start off with a caveat, which is before you try to apply any of the tips or frameworks that I'm about to share with you, you need to have a kindling that's going to serve as a foundation of your product vision. Now, what do I mean by the kindling? The kindling is essentially user insights or a group of user insights that serve as a foundation for why your product vision is true. And it's not something that you're going to find by just looking at a dashboard or even just one user research report. It really comes from spending time with your customers, really deeply understanding them as people and their problems and the ways in which your product can have impact in order to create the elements of the product vision. And so that sounds really great in theory, but I want to share with you an example to make it clear how you can go and find this kindling for your vision. So I want to share with you an example of something I worked on during my time at Thumbtack, which is called Thumbtack Plus. And the motivation for this problem, similar to a case study that I shared before, is that I was tasked as one of the product managers to solve the customer retention problem at Thumbtack. How do we get more customers to come back to Thumbtack and see that as a place for finding pros for their project? And so we started off by looking at the data because Thumbtack serves multiple different categories of customers and multiple types of pros. And we found that homeowners were a lot more likely to come back and use our product. And so that was really good insight to help us narrow down on the user segment we wanted to focus on. And then we spent a bunch of time going to people's houses and understanding what is that first-time homeowner experience like. And what we learned through that process is that home ownership is something that is a very proud moment in an individual's life because it's such a big milestone, but it's so scary, especially as a first-time homeowner, because when something breaks, you have no idea if your house is going to come crumbling down. And if you're a first-time homeowner, you've never done this before, you don't have the experience, you don't have the knowledge to be able to go and make those decisions. And so that kindling really served as the inspiration and vision for what we ended up launching, which is the Thumbtack Plus program, where we help connect our customers with people who can help give expert advice and guidance on what projects they should be doing. So it's not just about finding the right pro for their project, but we actually have to think about the steps that come before that in terms of making sure people even have the confidence and the understanding of what projects they need to do. Now, assuming that you have the kindling in the ways that which I've described, I want to walk you through each of the three elements of a sellable vision. And so the three elements are clarity through specificity, helping people really visualize the customer and the pain points in a very specific way. The second is compelling through uniqueness, getting people to really understand the value proposition and how this is unique compared to other competitors in the marketplace. And then finally, it's galvanizing through open space, helping people see not only where we're going, but the role that they can specifically play in pushing the vision forward. And so now let's go through each of the elements. First element is on clarity through specificity. And this really comes down to answering those three questions that I described earlier. Who is your customer, like as a person, not just who are they? What do their problems look like? And what impact does your product aspire to have on their lives? And so to make this a little bit more concrete, I want to share with you an example from my time at Propel. So during my time at Propel, Propel is a company that builds financial products for Americans with limited income, specifically those who are on government benefits. Now, this is like a really good pitch if I'm meeting like another colleague in the elevator, but it's not very clear if you're someone who works at Propel what we're actually trying to do. And so we started with, it's a super app for low-income Americans or Americans with limited income. That's also not very specific or clear. Like, what is a super app? What is a super app trying to do? Like, it's just not providing that much information. And so we did an iteration of this, and the results of that are on the top, which is we're building financial tools for Americans with limited income to help them reduce uncertainty, because when you're living paycheck to paycheck, there's a lot of uncertainty that comes with you being able to pay your bills, keep control over your money, and ultimately provide for their families with pride. And the things that I've highlighted in yellow are some of the key pain points and attributes of the customer that help drive a lot of clarity in terms of what it is that we are trying to do. And that's what I really love about this version of the statement that we ended up arriving at. The next one is about compelling through uniqueness. And this is really just about what is a unique observation or insight that you have about your customers that you can leverage in the value proposition that you present to them. Okay. Oops. I'm going to move this way. Sorry, are we having technical difficulties again? Back. Perfect. So look over here. So in order to illustrate the point about uniqueness, I want to share with you a little bit about Landis and the value proposition for Landis. So for those of you who are not familiar, Landis is a homeownership company. We help people who, on any part of the homeownership journey, find their unique path to homeownership. And the way in which we do that is we bet on people's potential rather than their current status or what happened in the past. And the reason why this is really important is if you look at the mortgage industry in general, you'll realize that a lot of the way in which they make decisions about whether or not someone should be a homeowner is based completely upon their past actions. It's did they pay their bills on time? Do they have enough savings, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look at the people who are excluded from the system, the reason why is because they might have either made a mistake in the past or by taking out too many credit cards, or they could be in a position where they didn't have the right knowledge or weren't necessarily in a situation where they could have set them up for success for homeownership. And so instead of looking at their past as an example of this is what their future is going to look like in terms of their ability to be a good borrower, we look at their potential. We look at trying to quantify not only just in terms of who we approve and our underwriting criteria, but even in the customer service we provide, really making sure that we are trying to understand the specific individual, approaching them with compassion in order to get to this really lofty goal that they have. And so for us, that's our unique value proposition. And then finally, we have galvanizing through open space. And this is really just about figuring out how you can create a vision that provides enough guardrails for people so people understand this is the constraints of the space I'm operating in, but not to the point where it feels prescriptive and they see a place for themselves in the vision. And so for this, I want to give you an example from my time at Thumbtack. So I worked on the search product during my time at Thumbtack. And one of the things that we were trying to do was figuring out the vision for what the search product should be. And through similar exercises like I've described before, looking at the data, understanding our customers, we arrived at this vision statement, which is guiding first-time homeowners to the right pro for their project in the most intuitive way possible. Now, one of the things that I like about this statement is that it makes it clear what the guardrails are while providing a lot of space. So for example, if I was a product manager and I was looking at this, if I wanted to build an experience where all you had to do was browse through the categories that we had at Thumbtack in order to find the right project or the right pro, that doesn't fit in with this vision because it's not intuitive, it's not guiding, it's just throwing you in there. And that's kind of what our past experience looked like. But if I look at this and I'm a data scientist and I'm seeing words like intuitive and guide, and I invest my time in figuring out how can I translate people's search queries in a way that translates to the list of categories we have on our back end, then yeah, that totally fits in with this product vision and is something that can help push it forward. So it's not just for the product people on your team, but also the other folks on your team that are supporting product. And so now that we've walked through all the elements, I want to help you see how we put together this in action. And in order to do that, I am actually going to take a hypothetical example. I've never worked at Airbnb. I am not affiliated with Airbnb. If you're not familiar with Airbnb, here's their description of how they describe themselves. And I want to share with you 2 examples of what a hypothetical vision could look like for Airbnb and ask you some questions about it. So the first example is here. Instead of reading this out loud, I encourage you to read this to yourself, and then just give me a thumbs up when you have finished reading.
You all have to keep holding your thumb up the whole time.
All right, see like half thumbs up. OK, cool. Now raise your hand if you think this is an example of a good product vision. Raise your hand if you think this is a bad example. I feel like, let's be more confident. Like, good or bad? Let's go. Awesome. So yes, this is an example of a bad vision. I bet you weren't expecting a pop quiz, but there was one. And so let's talk about why this was bad. The first one is that even though there are specific details around who the user is, they're not really tied to understanding who this user is as a person or their motivation. There's things like she's 28, she allocates 10% of her income to travel, but why does that matter? Why do we care? That's not very clear from the way this is written. The second is that there are no clear, unique insights that drive towards a deeper motivation. So it talks about, it's difficult for her to find travel services, to help her engage with the locals, to get the most out of her travel experience. But why does she care about getting the most out of her travel experience? Is she someone who's very price conscious, and that's why she cares about it? Or is she someone who wants external validation? And so for her, getting the most out of a trip means that she's able to get that validation. Really digging deeper, asking the whys in order to get to that is missing from the vision as is. And then the third is that it's too prescriptive. There needs to be more open space. We're talking about building search engines and filters, and that's too prescriptive for this stage of the vision. Now I want to share with you a better example of what this vision could look like. So same deal. Please take a read and then raise your hand when you're done. Can we keep our hands up? OK, cool. Everyone's ready to move on. Awesome. Cool. So let's talk about why is this better. So the first is that there are specific details that help us understand the deeper customer motivation. So in this case, we learn a lot about who Nina is as a person. We learn about her identity, and we learn about some of the challenges that she's had reconciling her identity. The next is around, there are some unique insights around why people travel. So for example, for this particular user, the motivation for travel isn't just to have a good time, it's actually to find community and to find other experiences and ways of living and enjoying your life. And then finally, it's galvanizing because there's a lot of space to ideate on what to build. So there are things around community and experiences and engaging and learning. And again, what I like about this is that because it's so broad, it's not something that's just specific to product. If I'm working on the operations team at Airbnb in charge of, let's say, the Airbnb experiences product, responsible for bringing different kinds of experiences to Airbnb's users, this vision is also helpful for me to understand what kind of experiences we want on the product to drive the feeling and solve the problem that we're ultimately trying to achieve with the company. So now that we've talked through elements of a vision, what makes a good and bad vision, seeing it in action, I want to try to wrap this up. So the first is product vision. What is it? It is answering these three questions. Who's your customer? What do their problems look like? What impact do you want your product to have on their lives? But I also like to think of it as, if you are familiar with constellations, a North Star, or even the Big Dipper and Little Dipper, where if you're lost and confused, don't know where you're going, struggling, the vision can provide some guidance towards anchoring the conversations and the discussions that you need to have in order to reach alignment. And then finally, in order to craft a vision, once you have the kindling and the insights, and you're just trying to figure out how do I do this in a way that drives alignment, it is bringing clarity through specificity, helping people visualize what you're trying to achieve and what problem you're trying to solve, compelling through uniqueness, finding a way to show people how this product is going to be different than other things that exist, and then galvanizing through open space, making people feel like they can actually be a part of this. And that's it. Thank you so much, and I'll take questions now. Okay, awesome.
All right.
Stand here.
Who's our first question? Who's our first question? Right there.
I'm Daniel. Can you hear me? If you can't get buy-in from your peers and colleagues on your product vision, what do you do to get alignment?
It's a really good question. I think it depends on why you're not able to align. If you're not able to align because you disagree on some of the assumptions, some of the kindling that goes into the vision, then I think it's worth understanding what data or what do people need to see in order to get to that alignment. I think if the problem is more fundamental, for example, like your company doesn't see the need for a product vision, for example, then I think it's a broader question in terms of like what type of company does your company want to be? Is this necessarily the right place for product? So I think it really depends on the level of disagreement. And I think there's a third aspect of it, which is like, I think the process of alignment always involves some level of compromise, right? So I think you also have to figure out for yourself, based on what it is that people are disagreeing with you on or where the misalignment really is, if this is something that you think you can either resolve through more data, if you think it's worth a compromise, or you think it points to a more systemic philosophical difference in how the company operates.
So for the Airbnb example, I believe, you had mentioned that it would not be good to, like they said that they wanted to solve the problem using search and filters, and you said that's not a good way to define the product vision. Is that because you're kind of confining the product within the vision? So then, to follow up, how much of the product do you actually define within the vision? Or do you just define the problem that you're trying to solve?
I think that for me, there's a difference between strategy and vision. The strategy is a question of how do you get to the vision? And I think there it's really important to define what are some of the tactics that you could see employing. I think for me, the vision is more about defining the problem, but also what does a world look like in which you have that product, right? What does it mean for the customers in which you're solving that problem? And I think if you oversimplify the solution and the end state in which you're trying to get at, then you constrain the thinking of everyone that's involved in the process of bringing that vision to life. Okay. I think the strategy is the right place to be specific around we are going to do this by building a search engine that does X, Y, Z.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think we got time for one more, right up in front here.
I guess my question is, who do you see as being the people that definitely need to be involved or in the room at this stage when you're setting the product vision?
Depends on the company. I feel like all my answers are depends. But it does. I think it depends on who you think are the right stakeholders for your product. So I think it might be easier if I give an example. So for example, for a company like Landis, we're a homeownership company. We're a very operationally intensive company. And so operations team needs to be part of the vision because we need to be able to align fundamentally on the type of customer experience we want to deliver. And they're a huge part in terms of us being able to do that, right? Because they're the ones that are interfacing with the customer every day. So besides just the product engineering and design, I think you have to think about what are the other functions that are going to play a critical role in delivering that experience, because you want to make sure that they are aligned with you so that whenever they're making decisions on their side, they don't necessarily always have to involve product. You all have the same idea in terms of where you're going.
Awesome. So everyone, one more applause for Vinamrata Sehgal.